Good evening, everyone. My name is Justin, and I'm a grade 11 student from Jakarta Intercultural School. Tonight, I'll be presenting my research in agenda-setting power during the Indonesian general election of 2024, along with a specialized machine I've built in order to run and conduct my model. Picture this. It's January of 2024, at the height of the campaign season before the election. The public is still talking about the recent debate between the three candidates. The sounds of "okay Gus" are echoing on our family group chats, and all across the country, the pictures of these AI-generated characters are on posters, billboards, and most of all, our social media feeds. Over the past 5 years, the landscape for political elections has changed dramatically in Indonesia. Instead of just traditional speeches and rallies, candidates are fighting over likes, comments, and reposts. And with over 87% of Gen Z Indonesians and first-time voters active on social media, whoever wins influence in the battleground of social media wins votes in the election. As a result, agenda setting has become a prime focus on the social media campaigns. To start, let's define what agenda setting is. Agenda setting is a communication theory that involves pushing certain messages and ideas to certain groups that are intended to be discussed or thought about, while also sidelining those that may be detrimental to that particular group. In other words, it's telling the public what to and what not to think or talk about. For example, if you were the leader of a campaign group, you would likely focus, the agenda that you would likely focus to relay on to the public would focus on your candidate's proposed policies or positive personal qualities, while also fighting back against criticism or past scandals. However, the relationships between which groups hold the most influence in setting the messaging agenda are still relatively unknown here in Indonesia. Compared to previous studies done in older democracies, the topic of how politicians influence the messaging of the public are still relatively understudied here. For example, in the US, in the context of Congress, legislators tend to follow the messaging set by the public. The question now boils down to, in the context of the Indonesian general election, which groups hold the most influence in setting the messaging agenda, and which groups are most reactive to them? To answer this question, I conducted a study analyzing the messaging of various Indonesians across various affiliations on X or Twitter, and using a machine learning approach, the responsiveness to issues in relation to one another. To understand how messaging agendas are set and how they spread, we have to look at two preliminary theories. First is the theory of the two-step flow, is the agenda setting theory, which I mentioned previously, which explains how oftentimes the public perception of reality is not just influenced by real events or experiences, but also from the reality pushed by certain groups and media. In essence, certain groups and mass media are able to influence the messaging of the public via their own mass messaging. Second is the theory of the two-step flow of communication, which explains how oftentimes most people form their opinions not directly from mass media itself, but through perceived trustworthy figures who interpret the messages for them. And these are what we call opinion leaders. Opinion leaders can come from a variety of followings, whether they be politicians, social media influencers, or celebrities. In Indonesia's social media backdrop, one group stands out among the rest, and these groups are what we call buzzers. Buzzers work as incredibly influential opinion leaders during the general election, and they are accounts that comment or message certain views and ideas to the public in order to sway public opinion. They can be both sponsored by certain campaigning groups or acted voluntarily by supporters. And they can range from a variety of followings, ranging from zero following mass-made accounts to large following influencers. They all have a large role in determining what issues are brought to light, interpreting the messages of the candidates which they support, and criticizing the opponents that oppose them. My study first starts with my collection of data, which involves X or Twitter messages. Through the media analyst platform Drone Emprit, who generously provided me with their open source dataset, along with my own collection of messages, I was able to gather a sample of 5 million tweets at the height of the election across 6 different groups. The 3 different campaign teams, the opinion leaders, which range from influencers to buzzer groups, the mass media, which include groups like CNN and Kompas, and the general public. Afterward, I ran conventional pre-processing techniques such as stemming, tokenizing, and assigning sentiment scores to each token. I was then able to fit a joint sentiment topic model similar to a latent Dirichlet allocation model in order to extract and model the topics along with their sentiment within each tweet. According to the content which was grouped into topics, I was then able to manually label these topics. And these topics range from issues like the presidential debate in January to the personalities of the candidates along with their proposed policies. Afterwards, I collapsed over all sentiments into a matrix of topic probabilities, built a data time series, and then grouped these topic probabilities by day. This allowed me to estimate the vector autoregression, whose results allowed me to compute the IRFs, or impulse response functions, basically allowing me to determine the responsiveness of certain groups to others in certain issues relative to one another. Basically giving me a summary on who is able to lead whom. Now, before I talk about my results, I'd like to also discuss an important part of my methodology that I've also been working on as a side project. Running a model on 5 million tweets is a very computationally expensive process. And at the time, like many of my other student researcher peers, I saw that the only way I could do so was through running it on a GPU rental via cloud on a data center somewhere else. However, I realized that over time, these costs would stack up. For example, if I were to rerun my study again, which would take about 45 gigabytes of RAM, I would have needed to spend an additional $700. Seeing how my school did not yet have a specialized machine or research to support the research of our peers, I and my friends advocated to the school, received funding, and built a GPU cluster specifically for our students here at GIST to run their research topics that may be otherwise too computationally expensive to run on their own local machines or computers, or otherwise too financially costly to run on a GPU center somewhere else. We dubbed it the Baby Dragon, and it holds an i9 CPU, 2 NVIDIA RTX 3090s, and 64 gigabytes of RAM, making it perfect for running any small to medium-sized models. So students, this is just a quick plug-in, but if you have a project that is computationally expensive, please feel free to sign up on this QR code or link, and I'll also be having it outside of my booth outside. Anyways, back to my results. My results indicate that as a whole, campaigners tend to lead the public discussion and set the messaging agenda, followed by the buzzer groups and then the general public. Instead of leading the messaging agenda, the general public actually tends to follow those set by previous groups, which is in line with the theory of the two-step flow of communication, as the general public tends to follow the opinions of opinion leaders. Therefore, campaigners tend to play the leading role in deciding which agendas are set, which is then followed by buzzer groups and then the general public. This stands in contrast to the US example, where legislators, instead of leading the public discussion, they tend to follow that already set by the public. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope that this brings insight into not just an important part of Indonesia's electoral campaigns, but also political processes as a whole. Thank you.